All right, so I think before we get into it, now we will have to actually complete what we did last class because we didn't complete the whole thing. Why is this so high up? I can't see. There we go. Hi, Ali. Hi, Atesh. How you doing over there? All right. Before we actually get through the whole, like, do the React CRUD Part 2, we're going to have to complete React CRUD Part 1, which is totally fine. Like I said, we'll take this as slow as we need to take it, and if we have more left over for next week, we'll complete it next week. Not a big deal. Yeah, you guys will be here next week, right? Because it's 29th. So you're off the following week then. So we'll definitely want to wrap up the React CRUD stuff by that point. The lesson that follows that will be adding in comments. So we're going to add comments to our blogging system, and that's when we're going to talk about subdocuments and nested documents and the difference between subdocuments and nested documents in Mongo. So we're going to add that, then we're going to create a new component on the front and show you how to actually create comments in there. And then we're also going to do notifications. So right now our notification system is completely broken. We're not actually be able to tell when we created a new app or a new resource or deleted a new resource or anything like that. So we'll be implementing that resource, or sorry, that notification piece then. What else will there be? That's basically it. And then deploying to Heroku, like how we actually go through the build process and deploy to Heroku. If there's time left, what I might do is actually take a look at Webpack, and we'll like look over Webpack and talk about Webpack. Other than that, I'm going to release a quiz. I have to make up 5 quizzes. So it'll just be a big quiz. You'll go ahead and it'll be open endlessly, answer it whenever you want, take it as many times as you want, so on. But you can use that for studying for the final test. And seeing as how you guys are here, I'll tell you right off the bat, the questions from that test will likely be the questions that will be on the final. So if you study using that test, you will do fantastic in the final. The final, more than likely, will be a practical, the same as the midterm was. The only difference that will be, everybody will have a different scenario. I'm hoping the different scenarios will stop, like it didn't happen in this class, but it happened in the other class, will stop groups of people that don't ever come to class from trying to piggyback off somebody else's group, which happened in the other class. But if everybody has a different scenario, it'd be very hard to do that. And I'm pretty resilient when it comes to people that don't show up and then start asking me week 1 questions. Yeah, I don't tend to answer those questions. So, cool. So, speaking of things that we need to do, Lab 4 and 5, I will likely release a Lab 4. There will likely not be a Lab 5, just to give you a heads up. I will bundle Lab 4 and 5 as one, and it will be probably adding some sort of CRUD kind of component in. It might just be a simple read. Actually, I think it'll just be a simple read. So you'll just read data from somewhere, show me that you did it, and that'll be it. Or what I may do is get you to hand in your current state of your project instead. So I'll give you an option. You can either hand in some React pieces, like even with Lab 3 that I'm about to talk about, if you implement some of the React component pieces into your project, and you have that done, you can hand that in as Lab 3 by the due date for Lab 3, and I'll mark that instead. So that way you're not doing Lab 3 and your project at the same time. You just do your project, then at least it shows that you're making progress in your project, right? So we're treating Lab 3 more like a progress check, right? So you can do that, or you can do what Lab 3 is. So Lab 3, for those of you that want to do Lab 3, it's simply finishing the About and Contact page, because currently they are blank and they are garish. So you're going to create 2 components. We've already created the components. They're there. You just need to fill out the DOM structure for them and then add some styling. We haven't talked about styling a lot in React, mostly because it can be taught in about 30 seconds. It's inline styling. So basically the same inline styling that you would use in HTML, that is the common practice in React, is to add your styling directly inline. React promotes that. We could get into things like styled components, but it's like a big topic, and it would take a whole class just to do styled components, and we're running out of time. So that's not really something we're going to do. So what I'm going to recommend is we'll just take the approach of inline styling, where you actually add the styling right inline, which you should already know how to do. You would have learned that from your HTML class. If you don't, please reach out, and I will walk you through how to do an inline style. It's pretty easy. So it has to be styled. You can use inline styles as that's the React way. In the About page, you're going to do a small paragraph biography about each group member, and then you're going to like turn them into cards or whatever it is to make them look nice, maybe add their picture in, whatever, right? And then a contact page, you're going to have a contact card for each group member. So probably 30 minutes worth of work, maybe not even. Especially like if you all do your own and then just add it in, it would take very little time. Okay, cool. Let's talk about project part 2, adding React. So you guys did the Node.js application. Now, when I did this the first time with Connor's group and those guys, some of them didn't want to continue with their Node application because they didn't like their Node application. So they wanted to build from, like they wanted to rebuild the Node application and then build a React front. And that's fine. If you want to start from the drawing board and build the whole thing and then include React, you can. That's totally okay. And I will mark it as a whole project still, so that's fine. Just keep in mind that you still need to make sure that you have the requirements, every requirement from the Node side minus the views. You won't need the views, right? But you will need those basic requirements. So you'll still need 2 resources. You'll still have to go through that piece. But you can do that if that's what you want to do. That being said, those of you that are quite content with your Node side, you can take your Node side now and you're going to take all the views that you currently have on the Node side and you're going to start converting those over to React components. You're going to take your Node side and convert it into an API endpoint, just like we've been doing into class, which is basically just turning your routes into API endpoints. What are you going to do with your 100% view-centric views that are inside the Node side? You're going to delete them. You're just going to get rid of them, right? So basically, you're going to look for new, because new will likely be the ones that you'll be deleting. Everything else you might need, but you're going to need to convert over your request.flashes and your renders over to send JSON responses, right? So basically, you'll just take what we've been doing for the last few weeks and implement that into your React side. There is a rubric. Thank God, because there wasn't a rubric in the last one. There's a rubric in this one. Very simple. Basically, 0 to 50% if you have missing views or broken components, which would make sense. 51 to 75 might seem vague, but basically you have components. Some of them work, some of them are kind of producing errors, but they're still working, but you weren't able to resolve the errors. That happens. Surprisingly enough, it happens quite a bit. And then 76 to 100 is works and little to no issues. So I'm basically looking like maybe you have a console log error or something like that, but it's not interfering with the total operation and everything's basically working okay, then you should be in that category. Implementing CRUD operations, so 0 to 50 means you're missing your CRUD operations, or maybe you don't know what CRUD means. Happens. So basically, as long as you have the create, read, update, and delete operations for the 2 resources, you'll be okay. You'll be in that 76 to 100% zone, as long as there's not too many issues. Now, that also includes duplication issues. Keep that in mind. Unmounted components. When you do Axios, if it's unmounted, it will call continuously on every single tick, which means you can wind up with like 7,000 blogs all of a sudden created because it's calling continuously on every single tick. So we're going to talk about that today anyways. So you guys will have that information, but in case you have friends that are not here today and they're saying, hey man, like it's creating like thousands of blogs every single time, you can say you need to mount your components and stuff. So we'll talk about the lifecycle today though. Push to GitHub and provide a link. Oh, implement styling. So a lot of the stuff that I got, which I'm totally okay with, a lot of the projects I got from the last term, they all, like a lot of them didn't have any styling implemented in them, which was totally fine because it would have been kind of redundant anyways because you're going to rip that all out. So basically when you built your Node side, you were building your API and you built a view set just so you could basically map out your API. Now you're building your React side. Now you need to actually put some style and some effort into that. So the way the styling is missing or minimal styling, and just implementing Bootstrap will be 0%. If it's just Bootstrap, yeah, I'm not accepting that. You need to actually add some styles. Doesn't take very long. And plus, most of you are in groups of 4 or 5 people. So like you know, if I get a person with one person and they don't implement that much styling, I'm not going to hit them as hard as a group that has 4 people in it with no styling. So some styling and some user experience elements. We're using React, so now you have state to be able to do user interaction. You can do hover effects and stuff, and a lot of cool things. I'm not expecting cool. I'm just expecting, you know, a half-decent user experience and that you kind of thought about it. Like, if my user clicks this, they should get some sort of feedback to let them know that this thing has occurred. Obviously, we're going to have to do the notification side for you to be able to implement that, but I'm looking for a half-decent user experience, which you should, as much as you guys may hate the users as much as I do, you should definitely try to build your application so that it works for them and that they're getting the feedback and the best possible experience they're getting, because at the end of the day, they're the ones that are going to pay your bills, right? So, and then the 76 to 100% point is everything is styled. You've implemented many nice user experiences. You know, it's got a good feel to it, right? I'm super lenient. I'm not looking for a huge, you know, I'm not looking for Facebook. I'm just looking for some commonality. So as long as you know, put some effort in and it's a half-decent user experience, you'll probably get 100% in that area. It shouldn't be too hard. Push to GitHub and provide link. You can only get 100% in this category because it's an either you did or you didn't. So if you don't give me the GitHub account and you don't give me a link, then it's a 0, right? And then deploy to Heroku, same thing. Either you give me a link or you didn't. One thing to note, I don't know if anybody in this class did this. I don't think anybody did. People were copying their dashboard Heroku links and then giving me their dashboard Heroku link. And of course, that doesn't do anything for me. That's not your website address. You need to click open app, copy that link, and then give me that link. I think it was just a lot of people not understanding what the deploy process was, so I think that's mostly what the issue was. And I think even if they had given me the link, it wouldn't have mattered anyways. But yeah, and then, yeah, that's it. So the whole thing is worth 20% of your total grade. Combine that with part 1, that makes 40% of the total grade, which is pretty hefty. And even though it doesn't state it, some of you may have received bonus marks in the project 1. Anytime people think outside the box and do something different shows that they're taking the learning that they've done here and they use that to facilitate further learning, and they show me something that I haven't seen before or like something that I haven't taught, then I usually will give a bonus mark, usually up towards of 10%. I think I've even given a 20% before, but that was some seriousness that came across. I think that might have been Oleg, actually. So yeah, just keep that in mind, that it does pay off to think outside the box. I mean, it doesn't matter. Even if you get like 140 in this class, you only get 100. It's not like it spills over into the other classes. Kind of wish it did, eh? Yeah. I've got an asshole teacher. Give me 140. Make up for that class. Stop going. All right. Today we're going to do some interesting stuff. We're going to add registration, log in, and log out. What else are we going to do? You know what? I'm going to go back a page. We're going to add registration, log in, log out. That's going to take about 45 minutes, he says optimistically. We're going to do showing one resource and editing a resource. And we're going to do destroying a resource. So a bit of a learning curve with the functional components. Some of the things that work differently than they would in class-based components, which was cool because I'm getting to learn some new stuff as well. But once you start doing it, you kind of see where it makes sense, and it's kind of common sense at the end of the day. But you guys will get to do that today. However, before we do that, we need to finish what we were doing with React CRUD, part 1. And I'm trying to remember where we got to. I think we basically got to implementing the index, didn't we? Oh, right. We did the create first. But I don't think we ever actually completed the Axios part, right? Yeah, I think we're still fairly behind. All right, so let's take a look here. That's new. Right, that's the one. Okay, why don't we go ahead and inside our actual terminals, let's go to our blogs. There we go. And I'm going to split my screen as well. So you're going to want to make sure you open up 2 screens. Okay. So unless you have split screen, which you may not, you're going to want to do 2 PowerShells or 2 command prompts or something like that. I think somebody told me Git Bash offers split screen inside their shell. And a lot of people have been finding Git Bash to be a little better. It seems to follow along with what I'm doing. It works on Linux commands and stuff, so it makes it a little easier. We are going to CD into client on the left-hand side so that we're in our React application on the left, and we'll be in the Node app on the right. It doesn't really matter which one you start first, but you will need to start both at the end of the day. I'm going to start my Node app on this side. The Node app should boot without issue. We shouldn't have any errors in the Node app. Knock on wood. And then on the client side, we're going to run yarn start or npm start or nodemon or whatever it is that you have for that. If you have yarn, you should be able to run yarn. Okay. So on that side, I CD'd into client, and then I'm running yarn start. Just delaying hitting enter because as soon as I hit enter, all the commands go away. Okay. All right. Probably going to explode because we have some... Oh yeah, no, we're good. Mostly because we're not accessing any of our blog stuff yet. We haven't actually built links to it or added it to our router. So we also need to open our application up inside our code editor. So I'm going to go and do that now. Go. All right. Now I've opened the whole application up. We don't actually need the... Oh, we will later. You know what? Why don't we make this nice and clean? And I'm just going to open up just the client folder just to make it a little easier to see. There. That's a little better. Makes it a little easier to see when you only see the client's folder. And I'm going to collapse this pages and partials because we don't need those open. All right, so one of the biggest things we did last week was switch from hook router to React router, and we implemented React router, which was a fairly painless, process to actually convert it over. And then after we were finished that, we started implementing the blog component. So what we're doing is we're taking all of our views that we would have had on the front end of Node when we were building it in the Node app, and we're starting to move those over to React. So we purged our API of any 100% view-centric things, like login was view-centric 100%. The new for any one of the resources, author or blogs, was 100% view-centric. So we got rid of those. We also got rid of our drafts and our published because we're going to use a library called list.js in order to do filtering and sorting and searching and that, so we didn't need it anymore. So for the most part, we basically just did a big purge. And then, so now our Node application is API driven only. All of our routes that we have, they're now known as endpoints. We're using those as API endpoints. We implemented a very simple authentication strategy known as JWT, which will allow us to be able to authenticate properly on that side. Basically, we log in, it assigns us a JWT token, and then we can use that token to make authenticated requests to the end. So that's where we are currently. Where we finished off was we were building our create logic inside our application so that we can create a blog. And once we're finished that, we need to be able to view it and all the wonderful things that come with that, right? Incidentally, though, we're not going to be able to use it because we have to authenticate in order to create a blog. So, anyways, so if you open up blogs/new.js, Oh, cool. Okay. Yeah, we're literally at the exact same spot as Thursday, which is awesome. So some of the pieces we did, we created some states. So this is our state. We have inputs, which is the state variable, right? And we have set inputs, which is the updater for our state variable. The reason why we have set inputs and we don't just directly assign to inputs is because if we assign directly to inputs, we just blow away whatever the value is, and it won't affect any reference to that. They won't update automatically. Whereas if we use set inputs, it will actually go through our application, and any reference to inputs that we're using within that components tree, it will go ahead and magically update them with the new value, and it will happen dynamically before the user's eyes, which is super awesome. That's one of the big things about React is the name, right? React. It's reactive. So the idea is that when you interact, it should react in some way. And so that's where state components come, or state objects come into play. They allow us to be able to do that reaction, right? We can actually listen and bind a reaction to it. So we also have redirect. The purpose of redirect is basically once we've submitted a new blog, we don't want to stay on that page because React won't change that page unless we tell it to go somewhere else. So what we're going to do is redirect to another location. But the way React works is React is constantly going through a loop, right? It's known as ticks, right? It does constant ticks, or you can think of it like a game loop, like in a video game. But the idea is that it's constantly listening to different events, and it's going through this loop constantly, right? Because it's going through the loop, it's going to constantly check to see whether or not we've set the redirect option to true, and if we have, it's going to come through, hit that spot, and go, oh, you're ready to redirect to the blogs, right? So we can actually set redirect at some point. The most logical place for us to set it will be once we've handled our submission. So we're going to handle our submission, send our blog off to the back end. If we get approval from the back end, then we will set redirect to true, and then it will go ahead and do its redirect. So that's going to be our next piece, and obviously in order to submit our form, we're going to need some way to communicate to the back. You would think that because they're both sitting on the same box, that we should be able to just directly connect to the node server and communicate with it. But in order to maintain scalability, we're going to use a library known as Axios. Axios basically commits AJAX requests. Our AJAX requests will be locally held, right? Like we won't be actually doing HTTPS to some address. We'll simply be just doing /API and whatever our endpoint is. But we need to do this because that way it will bypass the React router, hit our proxy, and immediately get funneled into our node application, which is what we want. So we included the library for Axios, import Axios, right? So you should have that at the top under line 3. And you should have this wonderful big form at the bottom. Hopefully you have all of those pieces. In our form, we put in some event handlers. So on the form itself, we have an onSubmit event handler. Those of you that took the JavaScript in the first semester will remember onSubmit was an event handler that basically listens for when a form submits. When the form submits, it will call whatever function you've assigned to it. So we are going to assign it to handle submit, which we defined up here, right? We haven't written any logic for it, but we're ready to fire it off. Then we also created an onChange event on each of the inputs, and we created a handle input change. And basically what its purpose is going to be is every time somebody makes a change to an input field and types a new character in there, it's going to wind up telling the state object that we're ready to do, that we have a change, and it's going to constantly feed that into our inputs inside our state object up here, which we'll see in a minute. All right, so we're going to handle we're going to do this out of order because this is stupid. We're going to handle the input change first, which makes sense, and then we'll do the submission change. So go ahead and stick your cursor between these curly braces on the input change. Handle input change. First thing we want to do is actually persist it. Because it's happening asynchronously, we want to make sure the event has completed itself before listening for the next event. Or what will happen is the characters will overlap each other and we'll wind up missing some of the data we require. The good thing about this, the good news about this is once we're done this, you can literally copy this whole chunk of code and dump it into any new resource you're going to create in the future and just change out the DOM part. Because most of it works identically from here on. Basically, this whole block right here will always be the same. It will never change. And it's generic enough that it never needs to change. Right? The only thing that will change is this block down here. Okay? And same with these three libraries. They'll always be the same. All right, cool. So handle input. Event.persist. That's our first piece. Basically, wait for the event to complete. Handle the whole event before you move on to listening to the next event. Don't let characters overlap each other. Next, we want to be able to grab the name and the value from our input field, right? And this argument that we're passing, event, it comes from the event caller, right? So when the event caller calls our function, it's going to pass this argument into our function, and we're going to grab it. And some of you may remember the event object from our JavaScript class when we started talking about events. That's the same thing. There's no difference in React. That is exactly the same thing. Does anybody remember how from the event object we can grab the input? It's event dot and that wonderful word next. Target. That's exactly it. So using event.target, we can actually grab the whole element. And then we can grab its attributes, right? And so if I want its name and its value, the cool thing is this name and value are already attributes. I just simply do event.target.name and event.target.value. So why don't we assign those to, applicable variables? So let's create const.name, const name, and we'll make that equal to event.target.name. And then while we're at it, it probably wouldn't hurt for us to grab the value at the same time. So let's go ahead and grab the value. There we go. Now, incidentally, ES6 gives us the power of destructuring, which is a super cool thing. Destructuring allows us to take an array, for example, of values and destructure them into an array of variable names. So if I have 3 values, I can have 3 variables. So say my variables are ABC, my values are 1, 2, 3. I can say const array ABC is equal to array 1, 2, 3. And then what will happen is when I reference A, it'll be equal to 1, B will equal 2, and C will equal 3. Incidentally, I can do the same thing with objects, and that's kind of what happens up here. This little piece here is a bit of destructuring. UseState is a module that is, or sorry, not a module, it is a method that is defined in the React library, and I'm actually destructuring it into UseState. I can't call this whatever I want, though. It has to be the same name as the method name or the property name that's set inside React. We can actually rewrite these two instead of being across 2 lines into 1 line using destructuring. And the way we would do that is we would say const curly braces name comma value is equal to event.target. And then we can get rid of the other 2 and save. What essentially is happening is destructuring is going to look at this object. It's going to look for 2 properties. It's going to look for a name property and a value property. It's going to take their values and then assign them accordingly into the name variable and the value variable. Very abstract. I totally grasp that. But it's super cool for cleaning up your code and making it a little bit more smaller and more human readable. But that's what's happening. You can leave it the other way if that is more readable, but I would recommend writing this one commented. out so that you know that it does the same process. All right. Plus, if you thought that was confusing, just wait, because we're about to learn about the spread operator, and that thing is worse. All right. So event.persist will prevent the event from being overwritten and allow us to complete our operations asynchronously. This is important to avoid having blank inputs accidentally. Next, we assign the event.target name and value to a couple of new variables, which is what we did there. Lastly, we're going to set the input using our update method set inputs that we created up here, right? We're going to return a shallow merged object. Every time we type a character in an input field, it's going to update the value. We need to be careful that we're not taking that value and overwriting everything that's currently sitting in set inputs, because that becomes a little bit problematic, right? We want to just basically take what's ever in there and then merge our new value into it instead. There's a few different ways we can do this. Some React activists, yeah, let's call them that. Some reactivists basically feel like what we're doing with inputs in this object to handle those three different fields is not the React way. They would much prefer you to separate them into three separate state setters and write three separate state setters, which is totally fine. If that's more readable to you and that's the approach you want to take, go for it. However, I kind of like this style. I think it's cleaner. I like reduced code. I like less lines. I prefer less lines, right? And I can read it okay, but you know, it's totally up to you. So I'll show you what this looks like. This is a bit of a mind bender, and then I will explain it. So set inputs, okay? Set inputs receives the value, right? And we're looking for an object. But what we can actually do is call a function in here and then return an object instead, and it will call the function and take whatever value comes back from the function and use that as its value. So we have two options. We can either hard code an object in there, like that, or we can give it a callback function, which it will call and then accept the returned value. So we're going to use a callback function. And the reason we're going to use a callback function is because when set inputs calls the callback function, it takes the current input, like the current value of inputs, and will pass it as an argument. And we want that because we want to be able to take that current value and merge our new values on top of it. The good news is all this code we're writing is generic and literally will be the same thing you do for every new you create. It will never be different. So even if you don't 100% understand it, just port it with you. All right? So let's go ahead and write that. So it's we're going to do it as an arrow function because I love arrow functions. So there's my arrow function. Inputs is not magic, right? Inputs is coming from set inputs. It's taking this value and it's putting it into this parameter that I'm storing there. Next, we are going to return an object, right? Because we told set inputs that we're going to use objects. So we're going to return an object. And in order to do this, we're going to do something called a shallow merge. It looks like this. Please don't attack me. Dot inputs name colon value. Looks like black magic, basically. I mean, that is some serious craziness. I'll explain it in a second. I'll let you write it down. Adrian, do you know what it's doing?
I ran into it once, and it took me like half an hour to even find what it was online.
The spread operator?
Yeah, because I didn't know what it was called, right? So I didn't know what it was.
Right.
So I was like, triple dots and JavaScript. It's like, no one, it's not written anywhere.
It's a super cool operator in ES6. Do you know what it is?
Oh, I go to the child's property.
Yeah.
And I need to use the previous sites.
Right.
It's like crazy. Do whatever you do and take the rest.
The funny thing is depending on the syntax that you use, it operates extremely differently. Like, so if you have an array, right? And you want to take the values of your array and add them as arguments to a function. You can take that array's name and do ... the array name. And what that will do is take all the values that are in there, pull them out, and flatten them into the function as arguments. And make them the arguments. There. You know what I love doing? I love the console. The console is our best friend. I'll show you what I mean. So I have, I'm just going to call it R. R is equal to 1, 2, and 3. Okay? I'm going to have a function called sum that takes a value of A, B, and C, and then it's going to return A plus B plus C, like so. I can run sum by going sum, take 4, 5, and 6, right, and it'll return 15. Perfectly normal. That makes sense, right? But I can take that array, go ... R, and it will take the values in the array, snap them out, and make them each one of those arguments for each of those parameters. No, no, you don't actually. So if I take R and make it equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, right, and then do sum R, it will flatten them, and I won't get the same value piece. Instead, it concatenates them all together, which breaks it. So that's the thing. And the spread operator works differently all the time. If I just write flat out ... R, no, that's right. No, I need to write it. Console.log. It will write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 with a space operator between them. But then if I take the whole thing and do A, B, C, D, and E equals ... R, this is destructuring now. Nope. You have to wrap them. How's that written? I always forget how that one's written. I think maybe it all has to be like that. Does it have to be written with a curly brace set to put it as a block? Oh, I can't remember. But you can actually destructure this into this piece so that A, B, C, D, E would all be equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 with destructuring. But then the worst of this has to be the shallow merge feature. The shallow merge feature basically allows you to take the value of something and then shallow merge it into the new thing, which is what we're doing with this structure. So, based on Ali's expression, the alternative to this, which is why reactivists like the other way, which is more human readable, is to take all of your classes that are in here, right? So all of your inputs that are in here. So you have a title input, right? So you would write const title set title equals use state, and then just leave it empty for now. And then come down here where you have title, and instead of handle input change, you would actually write set title and have it set the title for you. And you would do that for each one of those inputs. The benefits of using the destructuring with the spread operator with the shallow merge is that you don't need to do that. You can have any number of inputs in there, and it will just keep doing it. It'll just keep writing them up, right? So this code is now completely transportable to any, even update operators, update or new. You can just dump it in, and it will work from the ground up. Yep.
And there is also object key. I just discovered that for ES6. It also helps for the, instead of just an event.
Yep.
You can do it to the any objects. You can take the names of that, even if you don't know. You can do it dynamically.
It gets. JavaScript is probably one of the more complicated languages because it has syntax that breaks the mold. Like, it breaks its own rule sets quite often. So you learn all these sets of rules for JavaScript, and then now you get all of these new sets in like ES6 or ES8 even. Like ES8 that's coming on the horizon is introducing new pieces as well. And this stuff can definitely hurt your head. But the way I treat programming and what I would recommend to anybody, these type of things, this wonderful crazy operator here, it's a tool. It's a new tool available to you. And you can use it if you want to or you don't, right? And that's the same with any syntax in any language. They're tools. That's all they are. And whether or not you want to use them is totally up to you. Either you use them or you don't, right? So if you're comfortable with coding in ES5 and using ES5 structures, you do that, right? You don't write arrow functions. You only write regular functions. It's not going to change anything. It's just moving to new syntax provides you a different set of tools that allows you to do things faster or more deliberately, depending on what you're doing, right? So yeah, this super crazy, but after you do it, 10 times, you'll remember it, and going forward, you'll do it all the time and wonder, why would you do it any other way, right? So like that's really the way to look at it. You're using these things as tools. Don't look at them as like, oh my God, the syntax is messing me up. Just look at it as this is a different way to do something. We can either do it the other way, which is a little simpler, or we can do it a little bit more complex and get a lot more flexibility out of it, right? The big benefit to this is the portability. I would say that's 100% the benefit of that. You're not rewriting that code, you just port it around. We could even write that as a component, store that as a component, and then just implement it as a component into each of these if we want to dry it up even more. Yeah, hey Tosh.
Set inputs is a function that we are creating here.
Yeah, so note set inputs is created here. So what happens is use state is, so this is destructuring as well. So this same destructuring piece we're doing here, that's exactly what's happening here. Use state is going to return back an array of values. One of the values is the initial state of inputs, which is whatever you've stuck in here. And then the second value will be a updater function definition, which gets shoved into there.
So on line 13, we are basically defining that function that we declared.
No, you're calling it.
Calling it, and then inputs is the argument for that one.
That's right. So set inputs can actually take two different values. It can either take a new value for inputs, whatever you want it to be, or it can take a callback function. So if you give it a callback function, it will actually execute the function. And that's what's going to happen in here. It's going to execute this function. It's going to pass inputs, whatever the current value of inputs is, into whatever parameter you put here. I made that one up. It just makes sense to call it inputs because that's what's happening.
So it can be a new input as well, right? Not the one that we defined on line 6, it can be new ones as well.
It will be those. It'll be whatever is currently in that value. This is super interesting. Hold on. Can you see this board okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So basically what happens is when we initialize inputs, on line 6, when we call line 6, when we're done, inputs is going to be equal to this curly brace. Okay. Set inputs is going to be equal to, so I'm just going to write set in, okay? It's going to be equal to a callback function, or sorry, a function, right? That function can take one of two different argument types. It can either take whatever value you want to assign to inputs, or it can take a callback function, okay? If you give it a callback function, what it's going to do, set inputs is going to call your callback function. It's going to take the current value of that and pass it to it as an argument. So now in here, inputs will be equal to an empty object because it's that same one. Does that make sense? Not quite?
Last line is
Okay, so this is just me writing a Boolean to kind of show you what's happening, right? So when we create on line 6, we're using destructuring. useState is going to return two values. The first value is going to be our initializer value. The second value will be the update function. Okay. When we call set inputs, we can give it one of two arguments. Either a new value that we want to replace that one with, or a callback function. It's totally up to us. If you give it a callback function, it will call it. That's the purpose of a callback function. It will call the callback function. And what it will do is it will take whatever value inputs is and pass it to it as an argument. Totally up to you if you want to use the argument, right? All you have to do is catch it by putting something in here to catch it, right? I can put inputs in here, I can put Bob, I can put whatever I want. Todd, doesn't matter. As long as I have some sort of parameter to catch it. Once I've caught it, I can use it down here. What this line is basically saying is inputs, which is the argument. Let's change it to Bob, right? Bob's the argument now. It is equal to this value because that's what set inputs passed into it as an argument.
So when we use that spreader, right? The spreader operator.
Yep, spread operator.
Yeah, that one.
So what the spread operator does, it's really super weird, but it's kind of cool how it works. What it does is something called a shallow merge. So when we've gone through and we've done our inputs, right? Say you're typing your title out, okay? And you type out the letter A. What's going to happen is the first time we do that, we're going to have title all of a sudden in here because it will create it on the fly. And it's going to put the string A into it. The next time you type a letter, so if you hit space, right? So a space, if we didn't have the spread operator and the shallow merge, what it would do is it would take title and it would put space in there and blow away the current content. We don't want that to happen. What we want it to do instead is take whatever is in here and merge it up with our new value so that it's A and space, right? What the spread operator is doing is exactly that. The spread operator says, take the current value of inputs, then take this new name and property and add it to it. And it will say, oh, they already exist. The only difference is now you have a space, so I'll just append the space to the value. That's basically what happens. So one of the confusing things here for sure is this little block here probably isn't helping things. So, no. What this block is doing, where's name coming from? The IDE even highlighted it for you. Exactly. So you might remember from JavaScript that there are a few different ways that we can access properties. We can use, hi Mo, we can use dot syntax to access a property, or we can use index syntax to access a property. If we use index syntax, it's just a string. That's all it is, right? It's just brackets with a string inside of it. So, for example, let's make this equal to something. Let's make it equal to A, okay? So A is an object with a property called title. I can access A title by doing A dot title. That is perfect syntax, right? But I can also access it by doing A that is also the same syntax. Now what happens if I have B, or actually why don't we do this a little bit more on the nose? Name equals what, right? See what I did there? This is that, which is going to return what value?
A.
Well, A space, because we got that point. Right. Does that make a little bit more sense? Okay. So, what's happening here? See, I love shit like this. I absolutely love things, but the more complex it gets, I revel in it. I used to hate JavaScript because it used to scare the crap out of me, but I love when it gets this type of existential, right? So basically what's happening here is name is coming from here. So event target has 2 attributes on it. Those attributes aren't magic either. They come from the DOM, right? That's where it's coming from. So when you change the value in this input, right? If you modify the value in that input, the onChange event is going to execute. It's going to call handle input change, which is a callback function. That callback function is going to get passed an argument, which we're going to capture in the parameter event. We don't have to call it event. We can call it E, EBT, Bob, Todd, whatever, Bethany. Doesn't matter what we call it as long as we have something there to capture it, right? Then target. Target is the literal DOM object. It's literally this, but in its object format. So when these get converted into objects by the DOM, I'm more directing this to you because you didn't take the previous JavaScript course, but when these get converted into the objects, it takes all these wonderful attributes and turns them into properties on that object. So they become properties of the object. So when I want to access them, I can do event.target.name to grab one, or event.target.value to grab one, right? So the way we had this written before is we were doing const name equals event.target.name, right? I don't have to make this name. It can be Bob. Looks like Todd. Doesn't matter. We can literally type whatever we want there because it's just a variable name, right? But just to clean up our code, I used destructuring. And unfortunately here, I can't do Bob looks like Todd. It has to be whatever the name of the property is so the right value gets ported over. That's kind of the magic that's happening there. So name, when I type in, let's just see how well you guys are following along. When I make a change inside this input field, right? So this input field, study this input field, right? Specifically study the attributes. When I make a change there, what will the value of name be? Oh, yeah. There's a mind bender. What will be the value of name? I mean, my IDE is making it very easy for you. It'll be title. Exactly. It will be title because it's getting it from here. That's where that attribute is coming from. This whole thing is event target. This whole input is event target. Event target dot name. Event target dot required, which will be a Boolean value of either true or false. Event target dot onChange, which will be a function definition. Event target dot class name, which will be equal to form control. That's where those are coming from. So name, when I type in the title, will be title, which is cool because now what I can do is say title value. When you change the content, it's going to add a new property here, and it will be called content, and it will contain a value. But as you change those fields, this is going to change and keep merging them together. So I think the easiest way to see this, to be quite honest, would be to console.log your inputs. And then you will see as that input object changes. So add console.inputs or console.log inputs there because then you can visually see that as we type in the field, that inputs object is going to modify and merge and change. So at least then you can actually see what's happening. 100% why I love this class, because you guys are so engaging. All right, we actually might be able to run this right now, come to think of it. What do we need to do to make it run? We will need to open up. So I'll do Alt-Shift-2. Nope, that's not a thing. That creates a weird euro sign. Okay, I need to open up over here. We need to add this to our menu system, right? Our routes. So if you go to routes.js and open up routes.js, we're going to add a new router, but in order to do that, we need to import that blog thing. So let's call this blog new from .blogs blurg new. Okay, so that's importing new from blogs from the component section for us. And this is just a name I literally made up. You don't have to call it blog new. I just call it blog new. Maybe new blog would make more sense than blog new. But I like to go resource and then what it does. I like to talk like Yoda. And then I'm going to do a new route. Make sure it's exact. Path is going to be equal to /blogs/new or whatever path you really want. Doesn't matter. Component equals blog new. And now we have a new route. Now we can go ahead and create a new menu item, but let's hold off on that. We just really want to test this just to make sure it's working. So how do I get to our new component? The answer is on this file. Exactly. We're going to navigate to that path, /blogs/new. So if you go to your browser, if you check in here, there should be no errors. It's going to say Axios is defined but not used, and it's going to say other crap. Just ignore it for now. Okay? It's just mad at us because it wants us to do things that we're not doing. Navigate to /blogs/new. It's going to tell you I'm going to refuse to style this, which is totally fine. It can make its own opinions. Okay? Watch what happens as I change the title. A stormy night in Pizzaville. Do you see what's happening? This is constantly adjusting. This object is changing as I type. This is my content. Hello, Hitesh. See how it's changing as I type, right? Published. We will now, if I switch back to draft, it'll probably update. There it goes. So there's my object. But as I'm changing, it's calling that handle on change, input change, right? And as it changes, it's passing in that information. But it's not overwriting the value, right? Instead, it's shallow merging the value. It's taking the content that is currently there, and it's appending our new content onto it to modify it, right? And it's even smart enough to know that when I start to back this out, it removes it and updates it. Because it literally creates like an interception of the two values. And whatever the difference is what has changed. Super abstract, maybe a little bit to wrap your brain around. But like I said, that code, that block, this one right here, is super portable. You can port it literally anywhere. And the other cool thing is too, every tutorial online does it that way. So it's not even like if you forget it that it's lost in the wind, you'll find it again. Because everybody does it the same way.
If you were to just paste Sean, without writing Sean, just paste Sean.
Yep.
Sean just show up.
It will still trigger the on change event. So if I put Sean McKinnon over here, and I just want it to modify. I don't know if I can grab the value out of it. It's the only problem. I need it to show me. How can I do this in a way that it would show you, but not show you in a weird way?
Can you just like take the dot out of the test?
Console.log.
I think I just need to write the console.log at the bottom. That's it. If I move it down here, then you'll see the change. All right. So I've got an empty object. Yeah, it's still picking it up as an on-change event.
Okay.
Yeah, it's picking it as an on-change event. The problem is it happens after, which is really weird. So we're not seeing the update, but when you go to enter that stuff into the database, it will be there, which is kind of a bit odd, but it is there. Yeah. It's just our console log is not happening when we want it to. We want it to kind of happen we want it to happen after all of that occurs, but it's not. It's happening when it wants to, right? Due to asynchronicity. How can we force it to happen at the right event? I don't know, actually. There is a way to do it, though, so that it happens at the right time. Okay, so we have that. Is that all we need for that? That's it. That is literally the whole handle input change. We have our persist, which will stop values from overwriting. So if we didn't have the persist, what can happen is it might take a little longer for it to enter the space character, then the next character will come in and they'll wind up getting jumbled and in the wrong order. Because it won't happen synchronously, it'll happen asynchronously. So to stop that, we're basically saying complete your event before moving on to the next event. That's basically what's happening there. So the next piece we need to do is actually add in our Axios chunk.
Sean, question.
Yes, Beth.
When on the blog, the new post, when we change status, why if we change status to draft and say on the console status published and vice versa?
So that's because, again, it is changed,
Okay.
but because console log is actually console logging slightly out of sync,
Oh.
it's not happening when we want it to. So here's the problem. Our return is happening here, right? We're console logging the current state of input, not the modified state of input,
Okay.
right? So you have a console log here, right? And you've got inputs. It's happening before we return the new change
Right. Okay.
over. That's the problem. And even if we move it outside of this, because this event happens asynchronously, we're hitting the console log before this has even occurred. If we wanted to avoid that, we'd have to write it in something called an iffy and make it asynchronous. And then we could set it to a wait, which means it would complete the event and then allow us, actually, maybe we can do it then. It might return a promise. Oh, we might be in luck. Bethany's like, I have no idea what the hell you're talking about.
Sounds good.
So is some shit, Sean. All right, here we go. If this returns a promise, then we'll actually see it here, because what will happen is this will execute, and then synchronously, this will happen after. So if that works, I think, nope, that's a big error. Yeah, it turns out it doesn't return promises, so that's not going to work out. All right, I tried. I put effort. All right, cool. So let's add the Axios piece. So this piece here, as you can see, does lots of magic. And when it's done, it's going to basically keep track of our inputs for us. So you can keep that console.log if you want in there, but it's going to litter your console log with a lot of garbage, so you may want to remove it. The handle submit works a little differently. So the way the handle submit works is when you click the submit button on your form, it's going to execute this event. The problem is that handle submit has a default operation in the browser. The default operation of your submit will be to go to wherever your action is, right? So the action that is defined in here is where your thing is going to go. Now, a couple of cool things. One, we don't need an action at all because we are programmatically going to submit our form. So we don't need an action. So we can actually get rid of the action. Does anybody know how a form reacts by itself by default when there's no action? Say there's no JavaScript and we're just on an HTML form and I click submit on an HTML form with no action. What happens? Any idea? Where does it go? It does. Yeah, that's literally the answer. It goes to itself. It will post to the current page it's currently on. So way back in the 90s and like early millennium when PHP was big, what a lot of programmers would do is they would post the form back to itself, and then they would detect that they're currently coming in on a post, and then they would grab all the form data, handle it, and send it off. But if it errored out, they would put it into the form. That's how they would do it. So they do it all in one page. And then we started getting into better paradigms like Model View Controller and stuff like that, and we eliminated that kind of archaic thinking. Well, the funny thing is React, that's exactly what we're doing. We're posting back to itself and handling it, and we're in 2019. We're just doing it now with JavaScript, which is a fancier language. So that's all. Okay, so we can get rid of that. We can also get rid of the method. We don't need the method. Does anybody know what the default method is for a form? It is not. It is get. So forms will handle using get, which is kind of weird because when you use a form, the default operation you generally do is post, right? But no, that is not the default operation of a form. A form will take all the values that you put in those inputs, it will turn it into a very long query string and shove it in the address bar for everybody to see, which a lot of people are like, that's insecure. It's just as insecure as the post. Like, they're both literally the same amount of insecurity because anybody can look at either one of those. There's no protection there for those values at that time. So it doesn't matter, but we don't care because we're hijacking this form before it goes anywhere. The problem is the default operation of a form when you click submit is to navigate. It will either navigate to itself if no action is defined, or it will navigate off to wherever the action has been defined to. So what we want to do is we want to stop that. Anybody from last semester or the semester before's JavaScript class, remember, how do we stop an event from doing its default action? Exactly. We prevent default. And that will prevent the form from doing what it was born to do. We're saying, choose a new career path, form. Be a trendsetter. So that's cool. So once we've done that, we don't have to worry about HTML, the browser, acting the way it should act, and sending the form off to itself. The next thing we need to do is now deal with the form. So we're going to use Axios, access our endpoint in Node and our Node server, and send our form details off to there. Providing our Node servers were all coded properly, which they should be because we've tested them several times. This should just go to that endpoint and write a record and then return back a A-OK response. Hopefully everything is working. So to make that work, we need to access Axios. That's the first piece, which is our library. And we're going to post our event. So we're going to do axios.post, and that is a function call. So just to make things a little simpler, because I like doing these little like tiny kind of baby steps, right? Axios.post is a promise, and it will return two possible scenarios. Either it will return a successful response, or it will reject it and return an error. So in order to capture those, we can do a .then, and we can do a .catch. So that is the bare bones, the skeleton of that particular thing. Okay. The post takes two arguments. It can actually take a third argument, which is an options argument that you can put headers in if you want to pass things like cookies or stuff like that through it. Which, I mean, if you really wanted to reinforce your JWT, you could actually pass the cookie there, but it will pass on its own anyways. So the first argument is, where is it going to go? What is your action, right? So where's the path? We're going to API blogs. And if you remember from our routes that we created before inside our Node app, API blogs, when it's posted, points where? How can you find out? In Routes.js, in what side? Client or Node? Node side, yep. So why doesn't somebody go to routes? It's not routes.js, it'll be routesblogs.js. Somebody go to routesblogs.js and tell me where post API blogs is going to point to. What action? Not new, you're on the right track though. Create, exactly. It's going to point to the create action. So what we're doing here is we're posting to the API blogs. React Router is going to ignore it. It's not going to pay any attention to it. It's going to hit that proxy that we define in our package.json, and it's going to proxy it off to the API in our node. That's going to take it and say, oh, you want blogs and you're posting, so I'm just going to take whatever data you give me and send it off to the create controller action. So we need to make sure we pass the data along. So to do that, our second argument is an object. So we'll just stick an empty object in there currently. Now you might remember when we built the view for blogs, we subnamed everything under the word blog, right? So we had blog title, blog content, and blog status. We didn't change that in our API, and we're not going to. So in order to reflect that same idea, we kind of need to put an object within an object, which is not hard. All we do is create another property called blog, and we make it equal to an empty object. That's it. And that basically reflects that same scenario. Inside this object is where we're actually going to define our properties, title, content, and status, and then give them their values. So let's see if your detective skills are up to par. How do I get my title? Oh, look at this. Way to go, Funshine. There we go. Inputs, title. And then I'm sure you can guess how to do the other ones. And yes, we will take a break as soon as this is done. For 15 minutes, because I think we need it. Funny thing is, I didn't think this was going to be enough to keep us for a whole class, but I think we might actually just be able to get this stuff done. Then, right, so then executes, then we'll actually execute all the time. Promises execute all the time. All they're looking for is either a resolution or a rejection. Then we'll always execute. If you don't put a catch in, then we'll execute whether you resolve or whether you reject. It doesn't care. It's like super slutty. Just takes it all. Catch, however, changes that whole scenario. Catch will basically say, you get resolutions, I get the rejections. Which, I know, that's poor. That's sad.
So catch is then swingman?
Yeah, essentially, yeah. Yeah. That's exactly it. It's then's wingman. So then we're going to give it the successful response. So we're going to say response, and then we'll just leave an empty object in there, and then catch, we'll give error, and leave an empty object in there. There is another way to write this, he says, knowing full well that everybody's like, shut up. The other way we can write this is we can wrap our Axios call in a try-catch, like a normal try-catch, where we try this operation, and then we catch whatever might go wrong. However, the syntax for that requires us to use a wait. And in order to use a wait, we have to make our function asynchronous, and we can't make our function asynchronous without wrapping it in something called an IFI. So it becomes a lot more complex, and it doesn't make sense. The only reason why I'm bringing it up is because since the invention of async await, it's everywhere, absolutely everywhere, and everybody is going to see it at some point. So I'm giving you a heads up that you may encounter it. However, I do prefer, and I don't know if those of you that use ES6 quite often, I prefer the promise syntax because it actually reads better than a simple try-catch. I think it reads way better than a simple try-catch because I know exactly what's happening and exactly where it's occurring. So in the response piece, there are two things we're going to do. Actually, there's one thing we're going to do. So we could write this onto one line, and we will. We'll refactor and put it on one line when we're done. If we are successful, meaning that the blog has correctly been written, we're going to redirect. So how do I tell redirect that it's time to redirect? How do I set a state? So we have a state up here called redirect, right? And I want to change its value. How do I change its value? That's right. I mean, it was very hard to hear it, but that is absolutely correct. Now, ES6 arrow functions. If I am automatically just doing one line of thing, I can get away with something called an implicit return, which means I can literally just get rid of that curly brace, bring this right up to here, and everything is A-OK. Because it will implicitly return that line. And then with the catch, why don't we just get rid of this set of brackets? And for now, because we don't have a notification system, we'll just console log the error. And save it. So the nice thing, from line 35 up to line 6 will be the exact same logic in any new resource you create. It will not change unless you change the way you do this, right? Which is totally up to you, because you might. But that is just the way that will be handled, always. So the cool thing is you can literally just copy those and dump them into any new resource. And the only piece that will change is the form itself. You'll modify the form. And then when we write update, same deal. Edit will be exactly the same way. You'll port that stuff over to any edit. And then the last one will be show and index will operate the same way as well. So the cool thing is those things, once they're done, to create a new resource, you could literally just duplicate that resources folder and then start changing out the DOM structures of them, which is the way it should be. All right, so we have handle submit. If everything is copacetic, open up, hit Command R. It's going to say it's refusing to apply styles, which is fine. I don't care. Let's do a title. Humphrey Bogart's Wild Adventures in Arabia. Content. It was a dark and stormy July. And status, I'm just going to leave it. We'll change it to publish just so you can see that it actually does do publish. And before you do the submit, open up your terminal, or not terminal, sorry, this thing, the inspector on the side, which if you're on a Mac, it's Command-Alt-J. If you're on Windows, it's F12. If you're in Linux, it's F12. So Bethany, yours would be Command-Alt-J. Yeah. That'll open it up. Change from console by clicking the little arrows to network. And we're going to basically monitor the network. Change from all to XHR so we can only see JavaScript requests that are occurring. What we're going to do is we're basically going to look for when we click submit, we're going to watch Axios make a request through our network to our API endpoint and receive a response from the API endpoint. If there's an error, we should see it because it will actually return the error. If it responds with the actual response, we should also see that. Okay? So go ahead and click submit. We get a 500 error. If you click on it and click preview, it will tell you what the problem is. So mine is cannot read property token of undefined. And yours should likely be the exact same. The reason why we're getting that, does anybody want to take a guess at why we're getting that? We're not authenticated. So there's no token. So it can't authenticate us. So that's the reason why it's blowing up. So we're going to resolve that next by actually fixing our login and registration forms so we can register and log in. But we'll do that in 15 minutes. So we'll let you guys, why don't we resume at 6:45? So a little longer than 15 minutes. All right, so obviously with this defunct token that's broken, we need to actually implement our registration, login, and logout pieces that we are currently missing. The good thing is except for logout, we don't really need to touch the back end currently. I think what we will likely, based on the time, get login done, and we'll get registration done, but we won't get a chance to get logout done. But not a big deal. Logout's like 10 lines of code, and then we're done. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. All right, let's jump back over to our code base. So, like I said before, a lot of this stuff is basically the same. It kind of, once we've coded it once, it basically keeps showing up, and you'll start noticing that, hey, we just kind of did the same thing just like 10 minutes ago. And it's going to be like that all the way through because a lot of the principles remain patternistic, right? So under components, I want you to right-click, choose to create a new folder, and we're going to call this one sessions. And then I want you to create 3 files in there. You're going to create login.js, register.js, and might as well create logout.js so it's there. So it's login, register, and login. And we're going to start in login.js. Oh, no, never mind. We're going to start in register.js, which is totally fine by me. All right, anytime we're creating a new resource, this bone structure that we're about to create on our page is basically the way it's going to go down for every single one. There will always be 2 libraries we're going to create, 3 libraries we're going to create, that we're going to import. We're going to create a component function. We're going to export our component function. We're going to have a handle submit and a handle input change, and we're going to return back a DOM piece. That structure is never going to change for any of the new resources we're creating. So let's go ahead and do an import for the React. We're going to need state, and we're going to pull that from the React library. We might as also import the redirect function because we'll redirect, and that comes from React router DOM. And last but not least, we register our users by sending information to where? Yep, Node. Did you say Node? Yeah, to our Node API. And what library are we using to be able to communicate with our API? Axios, exactly. So we're going to import Axios from Axios. If you didn't want to use Axios, you could use Fetch. So the built-in JavaScript Fetch API is available to you. I just find Axios is a little bit more straightforward. With the Fetch library, you have to do double promises because you have to first get the promise for the request, and then you have to get the second promise for the response object that comes back, and that I find is a little bit tedious. This just kind of does it all in one go. We need our actual component, so we do function. We're going to call it register. And then what do we have to do to our component when we're done? That's right, export default register. Oops, just like that. Cool. This logic is going to always be basically the same. You're going to have some way to handle the inputs. So you're going to have the const inputs, set inputs is equal to use state with an empty object as an initializer. So that's the initialization value. And then you're also going to have the redirect one as well. With the default value set to false. Always going to be that way. Whenever we're doing new resources, we're going to have a way to update and maintain state for the inputs and a way to update and maintain set for the redirect. We need some way to handle the submission, so might as well just call it the same thing we call it every time, which will be handle submit, takes an event argument. And then you're also going to need a way to do the input change, which we might as well just call it the same thing. If redirect gets set, we want to actually redirect off to where we're going to go. So the way we do that is we're just going to go if redirect, and we can actually write this on one line, return, and this person has registered, so let's send them to login. And then last but not least, we're going to need to return our DOM structure. I don't know if this is helpful for you, but that is the skeleton of our resource, our new resource controller, our new resource component. So anytime we create a new resource, it's going to start with that. Now we can start filling out different aspects of this. So because we're creating a new author in our register, we have a form. I mean, we can go through and create the form field by field, or we can copy and paste. Does anybody object to copying and pasting? That's really the question. No? Cool. Let's go copy and paste that. So jump over to the week 11 lesson plan builder. And we are under React CRUD Part 2. Or if you go to lesson plan hard copy /10. The link is in the whatchamacallit. What's that place? Blackboard. So I'm just going to grab in this first piece where it says client source sessions register. And yes, I do apologize. There's no notes in here right now. I was camping all weekend long and didn't get home till like 4 o'clock yesterday. So I have code, but no notes. I will add notes throughout the week. Mostly because I'm an overachiever. So go ahead and copy from the opening div to the closing div inside there. And then once you've copied that, jump over here, put your cursor inside these parentheses, and then paste it, and then hit save. And my stupid IDE likes to split them up so that the inputs are written like this, which is kind of annoying, but that's just how it does it. But go ahead and dump your whole DOM in there. Cool. I'm going to collapse this just so we can still see the whole thing. It's not gone. I didn't delete it. It's just collapsed using the little collapse function things on the sides. What's that? Yeah. It's called code folding, I think is what it's called. And it's usually available in most IDEs. I mean, only really crummy IDEs don't have it. Actually, the first place I ever saw it was in Dreamweaver, because I coded in Dreamweaver in 2012. I haven't touched it since like 2014, but I loved Dreamweaver. It was fun. Now it's just a piece of garbage. It's so bloated. It's the worst. Yeah, I've seen a lot of you guys, like some of the people in your course use it, which I was totally shocked. Does Virginia use Dreamweaver? Right, part of Adobe, but even that, I still wouldn't touch it.
Well, because our HTML prof in first year.
Scott?
No, Jess.
Jess uses it.
So, of course, some people started using it.
She was like, oh, use Dreamweaver Sublime. And we're just like,
My only issue with that's one of the issues. The other big issue I have with Dreamweaver is its code linting is wrong. Sometimes like really wrong. Like we'll use ES6, but it's still programmed for ES5, and it will say, "Oh, that arrow function is total wrong syntax," and it'll put red lines underneath it. And now I find myself having to defend myself in a class of why your IDE says this is wrong and it's not, which is silly, right? Like, yeah, I'm not a big fan of Dreamweaver. I liked it in the day, not so much now. It did teach me PHP though, because I would drag the components in and then go look at the code, and then that taught me PHP. So yeah, thanks Adobe. But it was Macromedia. It's not Macromedia now. It's Adobe now. Okay, so we're gonna do the handle submit first. I mean, it doesn't really matter what order we do this in, but we might as well just do handle submit because we're right here. The first thing is we want to stop it from doing its default action. What do we do? That's right. Next, we want to actually send our stuff off. So we have to access with Axios dot, what's the command we use to send our stuff off, our data off to our API endpoint? Post, that's right. And post is a promise, so we need a what? We need two things. A then and a catch. And I mean, we might as well just write it out the way it is. We're going to basically do a response. And then we are going to set redirect to true. And then we'll just, oops, no semicolon. And then we might as well do the error one as well. And these console logs we'll actually take out at some point. And replace them with our notifiers so that we can actually notify when something goes wrong. Post takes two arguments. What's the first argument? Yep, the location. So the URL or the URI or our API endpoint, I'll accept any of those answers. We're going to post to authors. And what's the second argument? Yep, what we're posting, which will be in the format of an object. And if you remember, with authors, we did authors, and then everything was like a subcategory of authors. So we had authors, first name, authors, last name, authors, blah. So we need to repeat that. So we're going to create an object within an object. So we're going to do authors, and it's going to be equal to an object. And then we're ready to throw some attributes inside of it. So first name, and that's going to be equal to inputs.firstname. And we need 5 of these, so let's just duplicate all 5. And the cool thing is we can just jump over. I think it's, somebody told me it's Alt-D. So you double click on one and then hit Alt-D to select the second one. So you can do this kind of thing. And then that is our handle submit function. I heard double clicks. Lots and lots of double clicks. Oh, it's you. Are you double clicking, holding command, double clicking, and then typing? Yeah. Or control, I guess. Or no, you're on a Mac command.
Nope, it's down.
That looks so much like a Mac.
Everybody's going for that.
Yeah, HP was big on that. Nice.
Yeah. But it's nice because if you like want to watch a movie or something, you just do it like that.
Oh, that's cool. And the keyboard's nice and recessed so
Yeah.
that it doesn't get hit.
Yeah, it's got little bumpers that are just taller than the keys.
That's nice. That's slick. Probably crappy if you go to throw it on a bed, though, because the buttons probably get pressed by the bedspread.
No, it turns off the keyboard once it goes enough around, so that once it's
That's smart. That's some thinking.
upside down,
Yeah.
So it'll rotate automatically. You can do this way if you want it.
Ah,
It'll
cool.
stop the keyboard input. As soon as the node is upside down, it stops the keyboard input.
That's neat. That is cool. All right. Anybody still typing? No? All right. Let's go do handle input change. Put your cursor in there. And first, we need to persist so that our events don't overwrite each other and we don't wind up with, letters out of order or spaces and stuff, right? So we need to make sure we persist. Then we're going to use our destructuring. And you're going to notice this is the exact same code we wrote already. Nothing has changed. And then the set inputs, literally the exact same code. Oh, sorry, return this object. Wow, we may power through this quickly because we literally just wrote the entire registration function in 5 minutes. Not bad. Well, probably 15 minutes. Realistically. All right. I think we should be able to test it. We will have to create a new route, right, so that we can actually access it. I'll just give people a second to finish up. All good? Anybody still writing? No? Okay, let's open up the routes. And we will create a new route. So first we're going to need to import it. So we're going to import registration from /sessions/register. Actually, let's call it register instead of registration. Well, you call it whatever you want. I'm going to call it register. And then we'll create our path, which will be equal to /register. And the component it will be equal to is the registration component. Or register component, depending on what you call it. And now, in your browser, you should be able to go to /register, and it should take you there. Well, localhost :3000 or 3001 or whatever port you're on, /register. Cool. Anybody still typing? No? All right, let's jump. Let's jump. Register. Uh-oh. Got a failed to compile. Attempted import error. React Router DOM does not contain a default export imported as redirect. All right, so I've likely typed in something wrong. That would definitely do it. No mustaches would definitely do it. So we need to wrap redirect in mustaches or curly braces. So that was on line 2 of register.js. Just wrap your redirect in a set of curly braces. Okay. Then once you've done that, if you go back to your browser, you should see your form. Make sure you have your network tab open, right? So you can actually see what's going to happen here. Go ahead and fill out your form. One thing I've noticed is we didn't actually tell Mongo that we don't want to allow duplicate entries. So the benefit to that is we can test this form and not have to worry about the fact that we're overwriting people. Well, we're not even overwriting people. We're just creating new people with the same information, which would be the world's worst user base ever. right? But anyways, you get the idea. So go ahead and create whatever you're going to create. I'm going to create ASDF, and then hit submit. And we're going to get an error. Cannot read property token of undefined. So we need to fix that, and I know what's wrong there. Registration should not be an authenticated action. Registration should be public, right? We need people to be able to publicly register with our application. So let's break this down and figure out what's happening. So we're going to need to make sure we have open our node application because it actually happens on the node side. So make sure you have node open. Registration happens under our sessions controller. So that's where we have authentication. Sorry, no, it doesn't. It happens under our authors controller. My apologies. And I can see here that we are able to authenticate. We don't actually need to authenticate with the authors controller. We are fine there. So then the next place to check is app.js. And I did notice this the other day. I was going to release a small announcement about it, but then I thought I'll just correct it in class together. One of the issues we're going to have, you see how this says request.cookies.token? This is going to happen on every single request we do. Every request, our request is going to pass through this registered function. And what's going to happen is it's going to blow up on this. And the reason why it's going to blow up on this is because we're saying we are assuming cookies is always defined. But the problem is if cookies is not defined, and then we attempt to access token, we are now accessing a property of an undefined object, which means it's going to return back cannot read property token of undefined. That's where that's coming from. So it's because we are attempting to access a property of an undefined thing. So we're going to use a little bit of logic operator magic in order to handle this. And the way we do that, I want you to highlight request.cookies.token and then hit your brackets key, and it should put a set of parentheses around it. And I want you to do that to that one, and request.body.token, and request.query.token, and the request headers X access token. Put brackets around all four of those. And the reason we're doing that is because we want to encapsulate a Boolean logic check, a condition check, inside each one of those and have it return whatever the result of that Boolean is. So the idea would be if this condition is true, or if this condition is true, or if this condition is true, or if this condition is true, right? So put your cursor before the request.cookies.token, but after the opening parenthesis. And what you're going to type is request.cookies, double ampersand, and then the request.cookies.token. Now, you all took intro to programming, and you've been programming for roughly 2 years. So please tell me what that is doing, because it would do the same thing in every language. That's exactly it. It's going to check this piece, and then it's going to check this piece. What's it going to return? Doesn't actually return. It will return false, yeah, if one of them does not exist, yes. What does it return if they both exist? No, not the Boolean. Not in JavaScript at least, and not in C++. It will return the right-hand side. So the way this works is if this is true, and this is true, or this exists and this exists, it will return this piece, which is super cool because you can use that to your advantage to return that back if you needed to, right? So we need to do that with all of these. All of these need to be the same thing. So we're going to do request.body.token, or sorry, .body and request.query and request.headers and. Requests will always exist. Cookies might not, body might not, query might not, and headers might not. So we don't want those to execute if that happens. So this will stop that from being an issue. And the reason why we're doing this too is you see how this is const token equals. It will return this and store it in that. That's the way we're doing it. That's why the idea of it returning the right side is so important and not a Boolean. That is not applicable in all languages. So Ruby supports that, C++ supports that, and so does JavaScript, but I believe PHP will always return a Boolean value when you use a logic operator. I don't think it'll return the correct side.
Yeah. So if that wasn't the case, you just have to do like an if statement.
Yeah, you just
plug it.
use a ternary. Most people would just use a ternary, yeah. Ruby actually supports something called or equals, which is super awesome. So you can be like this or equals this, right? So you can be like request.cookies or equals null. And it will return request.cookies if it's defined, or it will return null using the or equals, which is kind of handy. I wish that existed in all languages. I think it's in C++, but it's not in JavaScript. All right, cool. So if you have that, you should be able to jump back. You will need to refresh, because anytime you do an API side change, you need to refresh your front end. Okay? Go ahead, type in your stuff. Humphrey Bogart, ASDF. ASDF, ASDF, submit. And now I'm getting a 404. And that's because I cannot post to API authors. In your register.js?
Doesn't know set redirect or redirect. Both are undefined.
Your redirect is undefined?
Yeah.
Okay, let's take a look. That's in your register, you said?
Yeah.
Sessions, register.js. Do you have this line?
Yeah.
Do you have React router DOM and there's no spelling errors?
Yeah.
And you're saying this is coming up as undefined.
Yeah. You can copy just the like both the imports from the lesson plan. No, it doesn't matter if the space is there or not.
Can you show me the error message? No, the error goes on. Set redirect is not defined, and redirect is not defined. So this is actually your, this is talking about,
This is talking about this line.
Oh.
Anything else to study in 500
What's your 500 error if you look at it?
Just talking about I could swear and call that we
Okay, yep, we can take a look. 1 second. I'll just let him finish. You might need to restart your node server. Did you use no daemon, or did you use npm start? You have to restart it, yeah. So no daemon will auto restart for you. npm start, you have to refresh it. Otherwise, it's just using the cached version of your application. Cool, no worries. Yeah, if you're using npm start, you will need to restart your node server. Okay, so if we jump back over to, I believe it's actually our routes, because the error message we should be getting now is that we cannot post to API authors because it is not found. So let's jump over and see why it's not found. I actually totally forget why it's not found. Authors. We have a post to authorscontroller.create, so that's a good sign. So that should be pointing to there. So if it's not set there, then let's check routes.js under the node thing. We have /authors, use the author routes. That's a good sign. Last but not least, under app.js at the very bottom, found it. See how we have app use /? We need to prefix that with API. That's where we have the issue. So that's on line 98. I thought we did that though. We're actually missing, we're missing a whole whack of crap in here. Right, but we have the JWT stuff, so this is really weird. Okay, so I don't know what yours looks like, but if it looks like mine, you need to get rid of these views.
Yeah, we already did.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I must have copied a different app file.
Yeah, I thought we did a lot. Maybe that's why it's exactly the same spot as Thursday.
Oh, because I copied Thursdays again. All right, get rid of the views. All right. We also need the pickup route from the other application, which I can't remember what that even looks like. Yeah, help me out. App.get. It's star. And then is it a...
Comma, then bracket request res.
Right.
Then error function, code bracket res send file, bracket class.join, bracket underscore dir name. Plus,
Sorry, so we'll slow down.
Oh, sorry.
Send file.
Path.join,
Yep.
bracket underscore.
DR name.
Yep.
Yeah.
Plus, and then quotations / clients / build / index.html.
Thank you. Cool. So if you don't have that, you will need that. So Adrian, you will need. Is client singular? Yes, client should be singular, not plural.
Change that. No wonder mine's working. It said
It won't change until we do the build. So once we've done the build and deploy to Heroku, that's when it would have blown up.
Okay.
Yeah. This is really just in place for when we do the Heroku. It will build with just, sorry, it will work with just this piece because it's kind of stupid. So we have to actually proxy when we're doing development. We have to proxy everything over. So we have to be able to intercept using this. But once we are done and we deploy, the node server's router will actually be picking up all requests. And which means this needs to either resolve or it will pass off any requests that don't match /API off to our React router. So that's what it does.
Which one does it not on the quotation?
The types?
Yeah, like single.
Yep.
double? Okay.
No, not unless it's causing a conflict and you need to escape. Yeah. According to the JavaScript linting guide, always double quote, which is not the way I thought it was, but it's always double quote, according to them. Okay, now everything should hopefully be working. We need to refresh. If you are using npm start, you need to restart. So we'll try this again. Humphrey Bogart, ASDF, ASDF, ASDF. Go to the network tab to make sure everything works. Hit submit. Yay! 200! Author was created successfully. Yay! And it redirected to the login page. Double yay! Everything's coming up, Sean. We're winning. Adrian, I make it my personal mission to try to make you laugh in this class. Do you know that? I don't know. I just do because you never laugh. You're like super serious. You're a joyful guy.
There are definitely certain things that bring Adrian joy. There are definitely things that don't bring him joy.
Got it.
I smile at least once a day. My quota of
That's right. You don't want them to go weak and flabby. All right. Let's open up the login.js, which you will find under client, source, components, sessions, login.js. Bit of a path to get there, but that's where they are. Interesting. This thing is working properly this time, not getting stupid hot. All right. Again, same three things right off the bat. Import React. Use state, because we want to be able to maintain state, and that comes from the React library. Import redirect, make sure you use the mustaches from React router DOM. And import Axios from Axios. Our component this time we are going to call login with a capital L. And therefore we are also going to export the default login. Cool.
We need to have the word default there.
So if you have a class, for example, with different methods defined, you can either export the whole class, which you would need to use default to do that, or you can export a specific module. So you could actually click in here and be like, I only want to export the handle input change. Or I only want to export the handle submit. So now instead of exporting all of login, it's only exporting those two. So that's why we put default. And then in your import, you could import those two things. So that's why.
So why don't we use default in the import?
We don't need to, because whatever exporting is happening, we're automatically importing it. Yeah, but we can actually destructure and import specific methods if we choose to. Yeah. But it has to be a class or it has to be a module export. It's kind of weird how it works. Right. We're going to need our methods, the const inputs method still, with the set inputs. And that's going to be equal to things. Use state, thank you. Brain stopped working momentarily. And then we're also going to need the redirect one with the set redirect. And that will be equal to use state with the default value of false. And I mean, you can just keep going because you probably know most of this by this point. Handle submit with the event. Handle input change with the event. You can see where scaffolding comes in really handy. Might as well do the if redirect logic. Wow, what English is that? And we're going to return redirect to equals, when you log in, why don't we just go /blogs, right? It makes most sense. And then last but not least, the return parentheses. There we go. That's our structure. Notice that skeletal structure is exactly the same structure we wrote for authors and we wrote for the new blogs. That's because now we're creating essentially a new session, right? So that's what we're doing here. I mean, most of the logic is almost absolutely identical. I have a mistake in here, but that's okay. All right, let's do ourselves a favor and go grab the login form because it's really not that big of a deal. Underneath your lesson plan, scroll down and you will find the login. It'll be client source sessions login.js. And just copy from div to div, from C to C. And then go ahead and paste that in your return. Oops. And save it. And then if you want, you can collapse it. So it's nicely condensed.
Why are we posting it to itself in this form?
We are. What do you mean, why are we not posting to it? So, oh, get rid of those. Yeah, we don't need the action or the method. Yeah. I mean, it's not going to hurt anything because we're preventing default, but it is useless attributes because we're not going to use them either. So they are useless attributes. So we'll just get rid of them. I bet you we have useless attributes under the register as well, come to think of it. Why don't we actually go fix that, go to register.js and get rid of those useless attributes, because I mean, we're not using them. We don't need them. Goodbye, useless attributes. Make sure you keep that on submit, though. You do need that. All right, onto the login form. We can write the handle submit because, I mean, it's basically this. Actually, let's do the handle input change because it's exactly the same as the other one. So we'll do the event.persist. We'll do const name and value is, oops, wrote that wrong. Name and value is equal to event.target. And then we'll set the inputs with our callback function. Oh, what you do? Thought it would actually break it apart like it did the last time. Very good. Incidentally, we could auto-return that object. If you wanted to, you could get rid of the return and this curly brace and this curly brace and write it on one line, and that would work because it's an implicit return, because it's only one statement. But Hitesh is shaking his head no, so let's not do that. He says, dude, only one board write-up per class. Not two. All right. Once you're done that, under the handle submit, this does have some slight differences, not much. We need to prevent this thing from doing what it wants to do, what its natural instinct is to do. Then we got to do some Axios posting. Dot post, which obviously we'll need a then, and we'll need a catch. Our then is going to be slightly different. Yeah, our then is going to be slightly different. We're going to put an empty callback function in here, like this, because I don't really care about the response, because I don't need it. You can capture the response if you want to. It's totally up to you, but we're not going to use it anyway, so there's no point. I'm going to clear our inputs by resetting the input to just an empty object. And then I'm going to set the redirect to true and get out of there. Not sure where I'm clearing them. Oh, we should actually be clearing all of our forums, come to think of it. That's fine. We'll deal with it when we hit it. Yeah, because React isn't stateless, it's stateful, which means everything will stay populated. So the next time you go to the API authors, it will still have all the API author registration data. So yeah. So we should be clearing every time we do it. And this will just console log the error like we do every time. Actually, you know what? Don't do log, do error, which I bet you didn't know existed. There's also info and warning. And the cool thing about making them specific is in your console, you can actually choose what ones you want to see by changing the verbosity level, which is kind of handy. The post, obviously, we need a path. So we're going to go to API authenticate, which we wrote a week or so ago. And then we're going to pass it the email, inputs.email, and the password, which will be inputs.password. Actually, I wonder if it will clear it. I want to test that. I want to test that. I'm going to comment out my set inputs. You can leave yours in place if you want, but I want to test that. Because I'm curious if it will clear. Maybe React has some kind of special thing where it just clears things. Anyways, that's it for that whole block. Anybody still typing it out, or can we go give it a go? Go give it a go? All right. If you open up your Google Chrome and just navigate to login and hit refresh, why are we not getting our form? We're not getting our form because we are missing a route. So open up the routes.js under the client source components, and we will create a new route. So import login from /sessions/login, right? And I mean, let's just be lazy because at this point, why not? Duplicate the register one, change that to login, and change that to login. That's done. Does everybody know how to duplicate at this point? Does anybody not know how to duplicate at this point? Awesome. Cool. I mean, that's the whole point, right? Make the IDE your bitch. Make it do what you want it to do. All right, anybody still typing? Okay. Thumbs up. Jump over. Ooh, look at that pretty login form. ASDF, ASDF. Make sure you have your network tab open. Submit. I see things. It's empty. I don't know if I actually was authenticated. I can check. I can go to cookies. And I mean, if everything is good, I should see a proper cookie. Let's go to application and check the cookies. Hello, cookies. See, I don't see the token set. That leads me to believe that I was not authenticated. Yeah, I don't think it authenticated at all. It did navigate to blogs, interestingly enough, and we don't have an error saying that we're not logged in. If I hit refresh, blogs should be throwing a big freaking error telling me that I'm not logged in currently. That's true. We actually don't have blogs. So let's go to blogs new. Yeah, you see, I shouldn't be able to access this page. Yeah, let's see. Yep, there we go. There's the 401. There's the 401, not authenticated. Dun, da, da, da. I wonder why. I actually don't know the answer to that. Let's go check. All right, so in our login.js, we are forwarding email, inputs.email, and password, inputs.password, which will hit our API authenticate endpoint, which is on our node server. So if we go to our controllers and to the sessions controller, we have authenticate here. It's going to find by the request body.email. So why don't we do ourselves a favor, console.log that request dot body, the body. There we go. And then, if we jump to Google Chrome, navigate back to our login page, we're going to need this guy up. Our console will actually spit out here. ASDF, ASDF, submit. Let's go check. So yeah, that's working. We are definitely getting the information that we need. So it would have found one, would have did the authentication. It didn't return an error, which is really interesting. Let's just make sure we're in here. Console.log, hey there. Let's make sure that it's actually hitting that page. Log in, ASDF, ASDF, submit. Yep, see, we're not even in there. So whatever's happening, it's due to it not matching, I'm guessing. Are we here? Console.log. I mean, we should have got this, your credentials do not match if that was the case. Hello. mean, I already kind of know the answer to this one. It's definitely not that. ASDF, submit. No. So we are definitely failing before those parts. Which means we are likely failing up here. So maybe we're failing down here. Console.log. Error. We should have gotten back the response, though. That's the only weird thing. Cannot read property authenticated null. Okay, so what that means is that it is not finding us. So it's looking for ASDF to be in the system, and ASDF is not in the system. So this, what is this query again? Do you guys remember? What database is that querying? The Mongo database, right? So if Mongo is missing the ASDF email in there, then it's going to return back null. If we get back null, we can't actually execute this author.authenticate because author doesn't exist, right? So that's likely what's happening is it's not returning back the proper thing, which is probably due to Sean being an idiot. The body email ASDF password.asdf. The body.email. I mean, it's right there. Let's just make sure. We will find out. And why not just console.log author? There we go. I know, it's so fun to watch somebody troubleshoot code. To admit, I'm kind of fast at it. I think I'm quick at it. Yeah, so the author is null. The body is showing ASDF. So that's definitely the issue. So the next place to check would be the atlas. And make sure we actually have something in there. I kind of wonder if something's goofy with the with it actually writing our stuff. I don't remember. So I'm not sure if you found this so far, but under Atlas, if you do your connect, sorry, not connect. Where is it? It's under, crap. Where is it? Collections. Sorry, it's under collections. And then you can click on authors. Why do I have so many random people in here? Did I really? I'm Burak, I'm Priyank. Yeah, this is super weird. I'm not actually connecting to these things then. Fine then. I need a first name and last name of somebody to connect to. That's really strange. Let's see here. I don't know anybody's password. I just need to register a new user, but I have a funny feeling I'm not registering to the correct location. Are you guys able to access the thing? Is it working for you? No? See, that shows that the author was created successfully. Stop dinging. Oh, I was onto the right page. ASDF, ASDF. Yeah, you see, it's not hitting there properly. That is likely Connor. It's Ilya. All right. I'm definitely not connected to the correct database is the issue. All right. Instead of making you wait, give me 1 second here. Why don't... Oh, it's already 7:43. How is it already 7:43? Give me 1 second. Let me just check my .env and see what's happening here. It's the correct freaking server. The irony is this worked at home just fine. Copy. That's what I'm checking right now, just to make sure that something hasn't changed really in here. What did that look like before? It's got to be working. Yeah, it's super weird. I'm able to create them and then I'm not able to re-register. I wonder if I've hit some sort of cap. Yeah, I'm using the correct connection details and it's not actually letting me put it in. That is super weird. I'm not sure what the issue is. When you log in under your network tab, you should see the authenticate, like where you actually made the call. When you click on it in here, it should say success. You are now authenticated. Something goofy has definitely happened. Yeah, the super weird thing is when it hits the sessions controller. So request.body is password. Don't authenticate. The problem is that it can't authenticate because it can't find it and it's not registering the new user to the database, which is totally weird. Like, makes no sense whatsoever. I'm going to pause this. All right, so the error is under register.js, which is under your source component sessions. And you need to change from author to author. And interestingly enough, we need to definitely fix the author's controller so it throws a proper error when it can't create a resource, which is not what it's doing. Yeah, lowercase author. Yeah. Yeah, that's a really handy error message, isn't it? Success, you created a new author. Everything's great. We're totally happy. Yeah. So now go create an author. Though why we don't already have authors created when we've been creating them for weeks. I'm going to go register, ASDF, 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 super lazy, submit. It says it created successfully, but I mean it said that before. Going to collections just to double check. Authors. Oh ho ho, I see an ASDF person. That's a good sign. ASDF, ASDF, submit.
Yeah, mine just says pending, and then it goes.
What is happening? It's just sitting there. Two things.
Yeah, that's, yeah. Good job, Sean.
Funny thing is they're all going to happen because they will all go into the event queue and they will just happen asynchronously. So that's interesting. Are we even hitting the sessions controller? No, we can't be because there's the body, the request.email. And, oh no, we are. Yeah, it's definitely hitting there. That's cool. So if I go here and hit submit, I should see that. Nope. That's lies. All right, let's kill servers. Maybe that's the issue. Node mon. And start. Yep. ASDF. Submit. You are pending forever and ever and ever. Why would you be pending? Has this information in it. That's the ID. Return back a password. So that's a good sign. You are console logging author. Okay, so I hit hidden here. It console logged the author. But it's definitely sending the error back out. I wonder if this is where the issue is. Console.log. Shit went sideways. Anything to show me something? Crash. ASDF, submit. Yeah, you're going to do things. No. So that's weird. What the heck? Oh, it worked on my machine. That's all I can say. Dot status 401. This guy should have a status. Oh, you silly numpty. I am so sorry. This needs to be dot status 201. Wow. Dot send. Success. Authenticated. Successfully. We're not sending a message back. So because we're not sending a message back, it just sits there and hangs forever. I am sorry. It's been a long day. Ugh. I don't know how I missed that. Didn't miss that with Thursday's class. So the way this works is we're actually setting a cookie, right, with a token inside of it. This status is the HTTP status to basically tell the server, or sorry, tell the HTTP request everything was successful, everything went and happened properly. And then the next piece right here, the send, is the message. It's some sort of body, right, that we're sending back. If we don't send a body back, it just hangs. If we don't send a status back, it just hangs. We could just send the status code back, in theory, and it would work, but we need to send something back. All right, so now, I'll leave that for a second because you're still typing. Now you should be able to log in and it shouldn't sit there pending for a million years. Yeah, that's what I thought. Definitely need to get more sleep. Took me way too long to find that. All right, if you jump over to Google Chrome, hit submit. Yay, 201. That's a good sign. Authenticated successfully. Woo! Let's call it a night. Sayonara.